In 2020, BTMC's tournament career was at its peak. He established himself as someone who could play a key role in the best tournament rosters and added 3 badges to his name. The first came at Osu TV-sized tournament as one of the leading contributors to his team. The second came at Corsace Open, one of the biggest Osu tournament series of all time, marked by his monumental finish in grand finals to lead his team to a first place victory. The third was his crowning jewel and biggest tournament accomplishment yet, winning the Osu World Cup as a part of the historic United States dynasty. It was in that year that he would forever be known as one of the few to claim Osu's most coveted crown and leave himself in Osu's history books with his play rather than his content-driven antics. But even in his most successful year in the tournament scene, there was a heart-shattering memory that he had no choice but to suppress. Earlier that same year, BTMC found himself in the winner's side of grand finals of USA States Cup representing his home state of Virginia. They were on a historic run, one where he and his Virginian teammates ran through everyone near flawlessly. But as incredible as their journey had been in this tournament, it sadly all came crashing down with a collapse equally as destructive. The once seemingly untouchable Virginia roster was completely dismantled in what can only be called a total wash in the grand finals. And in the wake of their second place finish, all that was left for them was the bitter taste of defeat, and for BTMC, tears that he could no longer hold back. But it was in this moment of despair that he would unravel a promise burning with passion with fire in his eyes.
I'm going to improve. And one day I'll beat Vaxi. I'll beat Iggy. I'll beat Monk. I'll beat everyone.
No matter how long it would take, he would deliver on that promise. He would do it even if all the odds were stacked against him. He needed redemption, and he wasn't going to stop until he got it. BTMC is and forever will be a top Osu player. Despite whatever funny clips might pop up in your social media feeds or whatever his Twitch chat tries to convince you of otherwise, it's a statement that is undeniably true. Yes, he might have been notorious for getting his score sniped out of spite for the sake of being funny, and yes, his fails and outlandish reactions might be more iconic to some rather than his moments of glory, but it can't be denied that he was among Osu's best. Not only has he hit a formidable peak that demands respect, his longevity is among the greatest of all time. Ever since entering the top 100 on the Osu rankings on May 18th, 2018, he remained a top 100 Osu player for 5 years straight, all the way until July 11th, 2023. In the midst of this 5-year stretch, BTMC reached his peak rank of number 30 on June 10th, 2019, along with setting some of the most iconic Osu plays of all time. At this time, however, BTMC was only known for his endeavors in the realm of solo play. While he grew into a player fully capable of setting crazy scores, particularly within the niche of no mod and hard rock consistency, tournament play was something else entirely. During his prime in June 2019, BTMC had only 1 tournament badge to his name, coming at Test Tournament 2. It was an impressive win in its own right, but the rest of his tournament history showed that he had a long way to go if he wanted to have a mainstay in the tournament scene. For lack of better words, BTMC's early tournament performances were not up to standard in comparison to the best tournament players. His first true 1v1 tournament experience came at the start of 2019 at Ironbag Tournament. At this time, BTMC found himself inside the top 40 of the Osu rankings and hoped his skills would translate into tournaments, and that assumption would seem to be the case, as BTMC would do considerably well in qualifying, entering the tournament as the number 13 seed out of 128 players that would qualify for the main bracket. But he ended up heavily underperforming his seed, finishing at 33rd to 64th place. The next 1v1 tournament that he would participate in was Touhou Tournament. There, as the 23rd seed out of 64, he would exit at 25th to 32nd place after losing to Umi. Then came Osu Black Rover Tournament, a much smaller tournament where BTMC qualified 4th out of 16 players in the main bracket. But he once again fell short of his projected placement after losing to Bartek in the second round, finishing at 5th to 8th place. Even though his placements in his first 3 competitive 1v1 events were a bit underwhelming, it hopefully provided the necessary experience for him to make waves in by far the 3 biggest 1v1 tournaments he would compete in that year. But just because he was trying his hand at larger tournament stages did not mean his tournament struggles would just magically go away. At Game Osu Tournament Winter Spring Edition, BTMC found himself in a position filled with potential to make a respectable run. After qualifying as the 15th seed among a stacked tournament lineup featuring players like Flying Tuna, Vaxe, Wolf, Bubbleman, Icky, and many others competing for a prize pool of 2,000 euros, now more than ever was his chance to leave a bit of a mark on the tournament scene. But in the first round, BTMC would get upset by the 50th seed Aiden, and after narrowly defeating Piggy in the first round of losers, he would get knocked out by Demonical to finish at 33rd to 48th place. A bitter disappointment relative to his qualifier result. Yaz's Summer Cup 2019 was the first time BTMC would finally finish at or above where he was seeded, but he entered this tournament as the 37th seed, and this was probably his worst individual tournament performance yet. He failed to win a single match en route to another 33rd to 48th place finish after losses to Topspin and Doomy. And and the only reason why he didn't finish in last was because he got matched up against Vaxei in the losers bracket, who previously forfeited. Things didn't get better at the 4th rendition of the game Touhou Tournament series, as BTMC would fail to qualify for the main bracket, although this time it comes with a bit of an asterisk as he was playing on a laptop at his friend's place. These lackluster tournament performances in a 1v1 setting proved one thing. On his own, he was simply outmatched by all the great tournament players at this time. He could play virtually anything with Nomad and Hard Rock with incredible proficiency, but his weaker play with other mods and especially higher approach rates with double time was very limited. But even though he couldn't do the best on his lonesome, didn't mean that he couldn't find success in the realm of Touhou tournaments. Just because he had weaknesses that could be exploited in 1v1 formats did not mean he couldn't make tournaments work. With how refined his skill set was with his Nomad and Hard Rock consistency, BTMC could thrive as a complementary piece on many top tier tournament rosters. His 1v1 results aren't the best, but what I haven't mentioned yet was how much better BTMC's results were in team-based tournaments. At the start of 2019, Ed would compete in Kanyo Cup, where he and his team would place 3rd. Immediately afterwards came his aforementioned 1st place finish at Test Tournament 2, followed by a 2nd place finish at Suichi Spring Cup 2019. Sprinkle in a 5th place finish at SS Tournament, a 4th place finish at Dino Cup, and a 3rd place finish at Dio's Bizarre Holiday Triples. It was very clear that BTMC was more than comfortable buying into his role as a cohesive piece on many top tier teams. And this dynamic would show itself at the 2019 USA States Cup. The USA States Cup series, or USC for short, holds a special place in Ed's heart. Not only does he get to represent his home state of Virginia alongside some of his friends, but it was also the first tournament he would find himself competing in back in 2017. The Virginian roster would show improvements in the time that passed since then, going from a top 24 finish in 2017 to a top 8 finish in 2018, and now this time in 2019, he and his teammates would finish at 5th to 6th place. Getting onto his state's roster was a privilege he wore with massive pride. It was akin to how making your respective country's OWC roster is something many people strive for because of the deep personal connection and pride it gives, which very much applies for Ed and his willingness to compete alongside several of his friends in the one tournament that allows him to represent his home state. And this feeling would only continue to grow as time went on. And perhaps that feeling ran much deeper than what we could see on the surface, because soon enough, he would make bringing the USC crown home for him and his friends his utmost priority. As 2020 rolled around and unforeseen circumstances forced everyone inside indefinitely, BTMC made lemonade out of the lemons the tragic events of the world gave us and used the new amounts of free time he had to better his skill set for tournament play. He was going to play in more tournaments and sharpen his play to be better suited for the highest levels of competition, and with a better refined skill set meant he had to take an increasing role in higher leverage situations. But he looked ready to answer that call. At Touhou TV Size Tournament 2020, Ed would play on Team Rubber Conquest, an absolutely loaded tournament roster consisting of Digital Hypno, Apraxia, Monka 2K, Azer, Fire Rage, Xarius, and I'm a Fancy Lad. They would end up claiming the first seed of the tournament, and they would perform as advertised as they would make it to winners finals without dropping a single map. There they would face Floating Up, a primarily Korean-based team that featured some of the best tournament players in the game in Orisia, Karuna, Flying Tuna, Restia, and many more. It was a stacked matchup with a trip to the grand finals on the line, but it was one that Floating Up would take massive control over, taking a 6-2 lead and were one map away from winning the match. Rubber Conquest needed a miracle comeback to even give themselves a chance of putting up a fight in this match, but a miracle comeback is exactly what they ended up getting. Out of nowhere, Rubber Conquest would take 4 maps in a row, including stealing 2 back-to-back breakpoints to tie the match at 6-6. Ed saw himself playing a massive role in this comeback as he was entrusted to play in 3 out of 4 of those maps with Floating Up sitting at match point, and now it was tiebreaker time. Unlike traditional tiebreaker formats where both sides play one sudden death map where the winner wins the match, OTST had map pools that featured 3 different tiebreaker maps, where the first team to win 2 out of 3 would win the match. Rubber Conquest would build onto the momentum and take the first tiebreaker map, making it 5 map wins in a row to go up 7-6, which was the very first time they held the lead in this match. Now it was Rubber Conquest that was 1 map away from winning, but Floating Up would stop the bleeding and take the second tiebreaker map, forcing a 7-7 tie and the winner-take-all third tiebreaker map to be played. BTMC was absent from the playing roster in the first 2 tiebreaker maps, but now he had to go headfirst into by far the most tensest tournament situation he had ever faced in his playing career. He was going to be deployed in the final map of this match, and as the map started, Ed completely seized his biggest tournament moment for himself.
It's only Fury and Bistro. Rubber Conquest can actually pull this off. It's gonna go the other way around. Rubber Conquest is actually doing it. Last quarter, and we are seeing.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, but it doesn't matter. Just look at both combos. They do have this full combo so far, and look the score. It's over. It's over. What an end! 98.5 FC. He's carrying.
From down 2-6 to winning 8-7 in one of the craziest tournament matches you will ever see, Ed showed that he was more than capable of rising up and coming through when it matters most. His incredible FC in the sudden death tiebreaker vaulted his team to the winner's side of Grand Finals, where after defeating Floating up 7-5 in the run back, his second tournament badge would dawn his Osu profile.
Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Perhaps this was the moment that gave him all the motivation he needed to keep up the grind before competing in some of the biggest tournaments of the year, because BTMC would see an increase in the amount of tournaments that he would play. Immediately after Osu TV-sized tournament came a flurry of respectable tournament results for Ed. Second place at Dio Spring Classic, second place at Touhou Tournament 2, and third place at Osu All-Kill Tournament 2. It wasn't all perfect, as there were a few medley finishes like 9th to 12th place at Suichi Spring Cup 2020, and last place finishes at Osu Map Clearing Tournament 4, Kanyo Cup 2, and Cobalt Bag Tournament, but the mixture of facing adversity and overcoming it left him in good spirits for his next shot at USA States Cup. With his increasing tournament success, his long-standing top player status, and now a couple badges to his name, some people pointed to something else that was missing in Ed's playing career: the lack of an OWC appearance and the lack of a Tier 1 tournament win. While he had now found his footing in tournaments, he was still looking for his winning moments on the brightest tournament stages Osu has to offer. And so, BTMC entered this tournament with a large chip on his shoulder. This would be the tournament where he would silence those lingering narratives about his tournament performances. Not only was this an opportunity to win a stacked Tier 1 Osu event, but it would be the perfect statement for Ed's claim for his chances at making his first OWC roster, winning the most prestigious tournament series in the United States representing your home state, and then proudly representing your country in Osu's largest stage. What a fever dream that was. But that fantasy could definitely become a reality. In fact, this was his best chance yet. Virginia's roster in 2019 was already a roster that only the best teams could match, yet their 2020 roster somehow got even better. With Ed on the roster alongside Tony, Chrono 5, One Tabby, Rectagon, and Sergeant R, this new look Virginian squad would take the second seed of the tournament, only finishing behind South California in qualifiers. And speaking of California, the Californios are without a doubt historically the strongest teams at USA States Cup. In fact, the entire state as a whole is so good, they had no choice but to split up the state into its northern and southern counterparts just to make the team balance more fair. But that didn't stop them from winning every single rendition of the tournament so far, with 2 USA States Cup victories going to NorCal and 1 to SoCal. If Virginia wanted to take this tournament, they would most likely have to defeat either one or both of these teams. But the developments for the Cali rosters would take an interesting turn. North California entered the tournament with a much weaker roster than in years past, as they limped into the number 12 seed of the tournament and found an early exit, failing to make it to the top 8 of the tournament. SoCal, on the other hand, were performing as advertised until the winners bracket semifinals, where they would find a shocking upset loss to Ohio.
SoCal is not to the losers bracket. I didn't think I'd hear myself saying those words, but Ohio has absolutely outdone all expectations.
Many expected this SoCal roster to completely run through the entire tournament, but instead they found themselves one match loss away from elimination. This was the best chance for all the other teams to end the Californian reign over USC, and Virginia took advantage of their fortuitous bracket luck. They knew that this was their best chance at winning their first USC title, and wasted no time as they beat Washington, New York, Florida, and Ohio to make it to the winner's side of Grand Finals with ease. As they waited to see who they would match up in the Grand Finals, a dark omen started to creep up on everyone watching. South California would completely destroy all their opponents in the losers bracket and would be the ones to face up against Virginia for the USC 2020 title. Now it was only Virginia that stood in the way of the California 4P, and they had to take down the behemoth of the SoCal roster. Most notably, they had to take down the three-headed monster that was Vaxei, Idki, and Monko 2K. These three won the 2018 Osu World Cup together as teammates. Vaxei and Idki were at one point arguably the number 1 and number 2 best tournament players in the game in 2019, all with Vaxei not losing a single tournament in the last 2 years. Despite having the advantage of sitting in the winner's side of Grand Finals, Virginia was seen as the heavy underdogs to their mighty opponents. But they didn't get there for no reason. They had the pieces necessary to take down any team they came across. And Ed saw this as not just a formidable challenge, but his greatest opportunity yet. In his mind, if he could take down SoCal and in turn their indestructible Big Three, he would prove that he was more than worthy of a spot on the United States OWC team. And there was no way he is going to back down with the USC championship on the line. With this mentality, he put everything into grinding away at the Grand Finals map pool, and entered this match with a great sense of optimism and brand new levels of confidence. This was his time to shine, but optimism can only carry you so far when reality stares you in the face and hits you like a brick wall. On August 16th, 2020, amidst heat record waves in the California area, the Death Valley Desert reached a temperature of 54.4 degrees Celsius, or 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the highest temperature ever recorded on planet Earth in 90 years. Not too far away from the scalding desert in various places of Southern California, the SoCal roster was set to play in the Grand Finals of USC, where on that blazing summer day, the Osu tournament scene would witness a murder beyond proportions. South California would defeat Virginia in the Grand Finals in 2 excruciating matches, dominating culminating with a 14-1 map record, including a sweep in the bracket reset match. It was possible that most of that summer heat found its way into the match lobby, as any hope that the Virginian roster had was completely burned right in front of their eyes as SoCal brought their magical run to a screeching halt. This was not a match. This was utter annihilation, with one side having their souls completely ripped apart while the other mercilessly introduced them to a reality they were not yet ready to handle. And in the final moments of this violent curb stomping, the normally upbeat and optimistic BTMC was forced to accept that everything he had been fighting for with all of his might was ruthlessly taken away from him. The only thing that remained after it was all said and done was heartbreak. His best chance at a top-tier tournament win vanished in the blink of an eye. His best claim for his OWC chances completely squandered, as he knew that even his best wasn't nearly enough. Years of passion and hopes of being prepared for moments like these, and he and his team only had one map out of 15 tries to show for it. Ed sat there in his most vulnerable moment of his playing career as the feelings of helplessness, anger, and many more flooded his mind.
It's so stupid because it's just a fucking game, right? But to me, this is more than a game.
But even in his weakest moments, he would make a promise. A promise that he would fulfill at all costs, no matter how long it would take.
I never want to be crushed like this ever again. I'm going to improve. And one day I'll beat Vaxi. I'll beat Iggy. I'll beat Monk. I'll beat everyone.
He craved redemption, and he needed it at all costs, even if it winds up breaking him. In the wake of his most heartbreaking defeat, there was no choice but to get back to the grind. But that's not to say his disappointment at USC was fruitless. With his increasingly improving tournament prowess, BTMC would participate in NAT 2020, the most prestigious 1v1 North American tournament series. In contrast to the lackluster 1v1 performances at the start of his playing career, Ed displayed his immense growth as a player and finally made waves as an individual player on one of the largest stages he saw himself compete on. He had by far his best 1v1 tournament performance to date, climbing all the way to 4th place after defeating Zelly, Fees, Zoodinator, and Apraxia, only finding losses to Digital Hypno and I'm a Fancy Lad, the two players who would end up facing each other in the grand finals. If people didn't believe it before, Ed was now more than capable of holding his own in the highest levels of tournament play. Even if he wasn't winning S-tier events, one certainty in his play was that he was giving players and teams a respectable fight with the potential to fly even higher. And at Corsace Open 2020, everything finally started to fall into place. Corsace is one of the most iconic tournament series in OSU history, with their team-based Corsace Open and 1v1 oriented Corsace Close being two of the most prestigious tournaments of the year. It has reached a level of prestige that very few tournaments can attain, only trailing behind the premier status of the OSU World Cup. In fact, Corsace Open is so stacked with talent that it is one of only 3 tournament series that give up badges to the top 3 placing teams instead of just the champions, a feat matched by only the perennial and the OSU World Cup. Winning all 3 of these prestigious events is informally known as the Triple Crown because of the top-tier status of these tournament series and how difficult it is to win one of these events, let alone all 3. But at Corsace Open 2020, BTMC was able to fit well into one of the best teams entering the tournament, the Nation. He would be playing alongside other top-tier players in I'm a Fancy Lad, Apraxia, Badu, Airyu, Bartek, Doomy, and Arison. Teaming up with Arison in particular was a super cool privilege for Ed. Not only did Arison rarely compete in OSU tournaments, but he was also the main inspiration for Ed to start playing the game back in the MC PvP days. Sentiments aside, this was their best chance at getting their biggest tournament accomplishments to date. The Nation breezed past all of their opponents with ease as they made it all the way to the winner's side of Grand Finals, only dropping a single set in the process and carrying an impressive set record of 11-1. In the Grand Finals, the Nation found themselves against Floating Up. Normally in the Grand Finals of a double elimination tournament, if the team from the loser side of Grand Finals were to beat the team from the winner's bracket, both sides would need to play each other once again in a winner-take-all match that would determine the champion. This is known as a bracket reset. However, Corsace Open 2020 was operating with a unique rule set where the team in winner side of Grands would receive a 1-0 head start in a best-of-5 first-to-3 set match that determines who wins the tournament. This was done to both preserve the advantage of advancing to Grand Finals in the winner's side while also avoiding a long runtime in the event of a lengthy bracket reset. This meant the Nation only needed to win 2 sets while Floating Up needed to win 3. However, the Nation couldn't rest on their laurels as they didn't have a bracket reset match to fall back on. This was the one and only match that would determine the Corsace champions. But the incredible prowess they had put on display throughout the tournament thus far continued. The first set of the Grand Finals was a convincing 4-1 win for the Nation, putting them one more set win away from taking the tournament. Set 2 was more contested, but the Nation held on to a 3-2 lead and sat at championship point. One more map win and they would win Corsace Open. And in their chances to close out the title right then and there, BTMC would do this.
If BTMC is going to run away with this now, he is the massive combo
Apraxia is matching Bubbleman, and Doomy is matching Okinamo. There's really nobody to match Flying Tuna, but an FC on a map this long is a ton of score. BTMC dropping accuracy everywhere, but he doesn't break. He's still going through the long stream here. If he hits this long stream, it's over. There's just no way. He's still holding combo. The stream is still continuing. BTMC is going on the long stream. He hits it.
He's shaking like a madman.
He hits the long stream. The nation is running with this right now. BTMC is absolutely going off, and ladies and gentlemen,
is that it? 1422275. What? We got it! We got it! No way! Let's go! Yes!
Ed's massive combo helped the nation close out the map, the match, and the tournament as they became the 2020 Corsair's champions. For the sake of many of the players on their roster, this was one of their biggest wins to date, and for Ed's sake, this was by far his biggest tournament accomplishment ever. Being a pivotal part of a team that took first place at one of Osu's premier tournaments was the statement victory he had desperately been searching for, and to help his longtime friend and sole inspiration claim the first tournament badge on top of that was the icing to his breakout year. And it was also convenient that we would find a familiar face on the OWC roster.
Let's go!
The thoughts of not being able to make it onto the OWC team after his crushing defeat at USC were all quelled as BTMC was able to make it to his first OWC roster in 2020. This was it. He finally got his shot at playing on the historic United States OWC team. He attained the one thing he had worked so hard to accomplish, and now he had the opportunity to play on the biggest stage Osu has to offer. Ed was now a part of the United States' efforts to completing the second ever three-peat in Osu World Cup history after South Korea's prominence from 2011 to 2013. The US were vying to win their third OWC title in a row, their fifth in the last 6 renditions of OWC, and looked to cement themselves as the greatest team of all time. While their 2020 roster was still incredible on all fronts, they found themselves filling some big shoes that went missing from the year prior. In 2019, the United States made the Osu World Cup their stomping ground as they completely shredded any opposition they went against, winning the tournament with a ludicrous map record of 36-3 in the most dominant team performance in OWC history. However, only 4 of the 8 players from the 2019 roster found their way onto the team in 2020, with those being Vaxei, Fiery Rage, Airyu, and Apraxia, while the other 4 players on the roster in I'm a Fancy Lad, Kablaze, Rectigon, and Ed himself were playing in their first OWC ever. But that didn't seem to matter much as the US entered OWC as the #1 overall seed and were considered by many to be the favorites to win it all, and they absolutely delivered on those expectations as they advanced to the winner's side of Grand Finals while only losing 5 maps in the process. They held each of their opponents to 2 map wins or less, and it looked like they would cruise to yet another OWC victory. In the Grand Finals, the United States found themselves going against Germany, whom they had previously beaten in the semi-finals of the tournament in a 6-0 sweep, but in the run back, Germany came back with a vengeance. After the US took a break point on the very first map of the match, both teams traded their own map picks back and forth. The US ultimately found themselves at championship point with a 6-4 lead, but after Germany secured their 5th point on their final pick of the match and dominated on the United States' final pick, the match was suddenly tied 6-6 as Germany forced a tiebreaker map to be played. In the meantime, there was nothing else that Ed could do but watch from afar and place the fate of his first ever OWC tournament run in the hands of his teammates who were beginning to fall apart at the final steps of closing out the tournament. But whatever feelings of tension he had would quickly subside as the United States would clutch out the tiebreaker map over Germany, winning the match 7-6 and becoming the 2020 Osu World Cup champions. Ed screamed and celebrated in disbelief with what just happened. In a year filled with heartbreak, despair, a brand new peak, and making it onto the team he had worked so hard to get onto, he was now officially an Osu champion. He could finally say he conquered whatever demons he had and anguish he experienced in the years past as he had finally claimed Osu's most coveted title and accomplished something that only the greatest Osu players had ever done before. He had done things many people dreamed of doing and then some. But even in the midst of all of his newfound success in the tournament scene, there was still one thought that was eating away at his mind. Are you truly happy with everything you just did?
I'm probably gonna just quit tournaments.
In the summer of 2022, I traveled to the Netherlands to attend the largest Osu convention in the world, COE. It was there that I was able to meet BTMC for the first time, and after we exchanged pleasantries, hung out for a bit, and found a place to relax, our conversation took us to numerous places. I asked him about what it was like to be one of the few to be an OWC champion, but he told me straight up that it was a title that looks really cool, but isn't one he holds much attachment to. On the surface, this seems absurd. How could claiming the most prestigious title in the game's history on the biggest stage mean so little? It was something he worked so hard to attain, and something he put so much effort into. How could he be so dismissive about it? However, after thinking about it a little bit, I knew the answer. In the summer of 2021, BTMC moved to Los Angeles in search of better opportunities for his career as a streamer and content creator. But he still had a passion for Osu and competing. And so, when USC came rolling around once again with his new place of living making him eligible to play for the South California roster that had been home to some of the greatest Osu tournament players of all time and has long dominated USC, it was only natural that Ed would find himself playing for Virginia's roster. Wait, what? It was well within his power and reason to play for SoCal. After all, he literally moved there the very next year after suffering that defeat in the grand finals at USC 2020. He had the chance to play for an even better team, the same team that seemed unstoppable and brought his dismay just a year prior, but he refused. Why would he do this? If a USC championship badge was all he was looking for, then there would be no reason for him to pass up this chance. But he did. So what could he possibly be looking for? Well, if you know how he displays his endless passion for what he stands on, the answer is simple. He wanted to win USC, but not just with any team. He wanted to win alongside his friends representing the very state he was born in. He wouldn't be satisfied with merely winning USC if it meant caving to the path of least resistance to victory and switching up on his longtime friends and teammates in the process. In his eyes, that would be a hollow victory. And speaking of hollow victories, Ed spent a lot of time wrestling with the thoughts of his OWC win as well. BTMC will forever be an Osu champion. That cannot be denied. He has the badge and title to show for it, with many priests coming and going as he was now permanently a part of Osu history. But did it really feel like a victory to him? In the run to winning OWC 2020, the United States played in a total of 47 maps in the main bracket. Out of those 47 maps, BTMC found himself playing in only 12 of them. That was barely a quarter of the total maps his team played throughout the entire tournament. In every single one of their matches, Ed was absent for more than half of the maps that were picked, and his use rate significantly declined in the later stages of the tournament. Most concerning of all was that in the finals and grand final stage of the tournament, Ed was mostly a non-factor, playing in just 3 out of the 21 maps the United States played in. When it mattered the most in the most tightly contested stages at OWC, BTMC had a dismal 14% use rate in the final 2 weeks of the tournament. His performances in those maps didn't make things better either, as in those 3 maps, he finished no higher than 3rd among his teammates, including bottom scoring the entire lobby in 1 map of the OWC Grand Finals. He ultimately ended up finishing with the worst match cost in the winners bracket final against Canada, and the 2nd worst match cost in the Grand Finals versus Germany. In the most pivotal moments of his tournament career, Ed brutally underperformed in the few opportunities he was given, and wound up on the bench for the large majority of his team's matches. If you tune into a BTMC stream and want to know where the BTMC bench emote originates from, this was where it all started. Nowadays, the BTMC bench talk is memed to hell and back whenever he sits out during a tournament match, but what people might not realize is that it's a silent reminder to Ed about what happened at OWC. While he seemed happy just to make it onto the team and win the entire tournament, being known as merely a bench warmer to that winning roster is undoubtedly a conflicting feeling. Yes, you won, and that can't be taken away from you. But when many people are under the impression that you got carried on your way to the top, is it really worth celebrating? Is an accomplishment truly worth something if you merely just played a marginal part of it that many people overlook? Everyone wants to be a part of the big picture within something special, but sometimes the nature of team competition makes it feel frustrating. While someone can try their best to embrace the role of a bench warmer who cheers their teammates on from the sidelines, there's always that small part of everyone that wishes they could have been the ones out there making a difference. And with Ed's competitive nature, his OWC badge sits there not as a privilege he wears with honor, but as a reminder that he was better than the narratives of his tournament run suggested. With all of that in mind, even though his career as a streamer and life as a whole have gone through significant changes over the past few years, he still found himself competing in USC as a part of Team Virginia. But with all the new endeavors he sought to take on, it came with a cost. With the added focus on bolstering his opportunities in the streaming world outside of Osu, and probably one too many Genshin streams, it meant that Ed was unable to grind his tournament skill set as much as he did in 2020. And this was evident by the regression in his tournament performances in the following years. In the 3-year span from 2021 to 2023, BTMC failed to win a single tournament badge, and his tournament performances saw a significant decline. At NAT 2021, it looked like Ed was still at his peak form, qualifying for the tournament as the 3rd seed, above top-tier tournament players like Taquito, I'm a Fancy Lad, Kablaze, Airyu, Zudinator, and many others. He was projected to finish in the top 3 only behind Nikki 1324 and Utami, but fell back to a lackluster 25th place and severely underperformed his seed. He was still able to make it to Virginia's roster at USC that year, but it wasn't the reunion he wanted, as Team Virginia exited at 3rd place despite their number 1 seed, eliminated by the eventual champion South California for the 2nd year in a row. In addition, BTMC was left off the United States OWC 2021 roster despite making the team in the year prior, as his skill set was no longer up to standard. And sadly, this would be the last bit of regular tournament activity that Ed would partake in. From 2022 to 2023, BTMC participated in only 2 tournaments total, those being Speed Cup 5 5, where his team went 1-2 and finished outside the top 16, and Ember Grandmaster Cup, where he outright failed to qualify for the tournament. Washed up talks were beginning to surface as not only his tournament skills rusted more and more, but also his rank declined outside the top 100 for the first time in 5 years. And to add more salt in the wound, Virginia did eventually get their first ever win at USA States Cup in 2023, but Ed was nowhere to be found on their roster. The very thing he wanted to accomplish alongside his friends was finally done, but he was absent from the run to the top. If this trend of inactivity were to hold, Ed's tournament career would go out with a silent whimper without tasting the glory he had desperately chased for several years. But whether he was given a new spark of motivation after seeing his friends finally overcome the odds, or if he wanted to be a part of that championship caliber roster once again, he would finally make his return to the tournament scene. He was going to give it one last chance to do the things he always wanted to do. In 2024, there was only one tournament BTMC would find himself participating in, but it was a momentous occasion for him, as for the first time in 3 years, he returned to Virginia's roster and was once again competing in USA States Cup. But things this time around were much different. Starting off with Ed himself, this was a reformed BTMC compared to his previous stint on the Virginia roster in 2021. Back then, his tournament motivation was wavering, his playing activity slumped, his overall skills as a player regressed, and he simply wasn't in shape to make a significant positive impact for his team. And he would be the first one to tell you that. But now, in 2024, Ed was arguably at a brand new peak. A peak where he was constantly getting closer and closer to setting his brand new top play for the first time in more than 3 years, and even break the 1K PP milestone for the first time ever. Something that no one could have seen coming, especially within the context of his stagnant player growth. This gave him the confidence to return to USC, although this time, the narrative he had set for himself was much different. There is no telling if he would give tournaments another chance after this year. All we could do is speculate, as he's the only one that knows the answer to that question. But based on his near-empty tournament catalog as of late, this could very well be his last dance. For all we know, this might be the last chance he has to attain the crown he had long been searching for, and so the OSU community looked on, knowing that this might be where BTMC's tournament career might come to an end. The question is, will he go out with a bang, or will the long silent whimper continue? Virginia were the defending USC champions, but entered the tournament as merely dark horse candidates to go back-to-back as they slid from the number 1 seed in 2023 down to the 5th seed in 2024. Two of the teams they were seeded behind were the dreaded North and South California rosters, who combined to win every iteration of USC except in 2021 when Florida took first place, and in 2023 in Virginia's run without Ed. These two teams were seeded at number 1 and number 4 respectively, which meant that Virginia's bracket would lead them straight into both of the Cali rosters. But before they could worry about that, they first needed to get there. First round of the tournament saw Virginia go up against Puerto Rico, and there was a degree of uncertainty with Ed's tournament inactivity up to this point.
BTMC, who's... honestly, I haven't been watching his streams. I don't know how his D-Rust is going.
There were many legitimate concerns, but those thoughts would immediately cease as Ed would completely light everyone up.
Virginia to close out. Shout outs to Edward for the full combo and the only one at that. Puerto Rico needed a double FC to match up to Virginia in the first place, and
honestly, very impressed with Ed so far this match. BTMC, I don't think I've seen him miss so far in this match.
4 for 4 on full combos. BTMC, the valiant comeback and a massive start for Virginia and United States Cup. 5 out of 5 FCs.
Many people couldn't believe it, but he was officially back and better than ever before. He FC'd each of the 5 maps that were played, top scored 3 times, and finished with a match cost of a dominating 2.125, by far the best out of all the players in the match lobby. He was so good in this match that he finished as the number 1 best performing player in the round of 32. It had been so long since we've seen these types of performances from him, but he reignited that spark once again in big time fashion, but he couldn't stop there. Next up was Pennsylvania in the round of 16. And while his play wasn't the picture perfect performance like it was in the week prior, BTMC still showed up in a huge way as Virginia prevailed 5-3. Ed was the only player in the lobby to have been trusted to play in all 8 maps in the match and managed to get 2 top scores en route to finishing with the 2nd highest match cost, only behind his teammate RNG. This win meant they were on their way to the quarterfinals, which meant they had to play... not again. Virginia would have to face South California, the same team Ed failed to beat in his 3 previous encounters and eliminated him in his last 2 USC appearances. Whether he liked it or not, BTMC had no choice but to run through his past bracket demons, otherwise he and his team would risk elimination in the losers bracket. Although SoCal had slid down to the 4th seed, they were still one of the favorites to take the entire tournament led by Utami, but thankfully, Virginia had a superstar of their own. Rectigun has since taken over as arguably the best tournament player in the United States, especially after his clutch performances in big moments was in the United States Championship run at the 2023 OSA World Cup. From there, his tournament prowess only continued to grow as he blossomed into one of the game's top-tier tournament players with ludicrous levels of consistency. This was going to be a battle between the two tournament demons. Everyone knew that Utami and Rectigon would play in every single map and put up crazy scores. However, it was going to be the players who would play alongside each of them that would determine the fate of these teams. Virginia had the first pick of the match and opted to pick Hidden 2, but Utami immediately opened up with an FC to give SoCal a quick breakpoint advantage. SoCal would then capitalize on the early breakpoint by winning their DT4 pick with an FC from Rico L to take a 2-0 lead. Virginia would get their first point on the board with a destructive win on their Nomad 2 pick led by an FC from Rectigon, but they still needed to find a win on one of SoCal's picks. SoCal opted to go with Hidden 1, but this was where Virginia's team support would begin to shine. Despite Rectigon bottom scoring their team and Utami setting another FC, Virginia would tie the match at 2. RNG came in huge to offset Utami's score with an FC of his own, and the great backing from one tabby alongside Rectigon's score was enough for Virginia to tie things up. And as it turns out, this map win proved to be vital as this would be the last breakpoint to be surrendered by either side. From here, the match would end up trickling to a 5-5 tie as both teams would end up trading their own map picks back and forth. This stretch of the match was headlined by an incredible duel between Rectigon and Utami, as both players would top score each of their respective teams on the final 6 maps of the match. Rectigon would add 3 more FCs, while Utami would end up finishing the match with an FC on every single one of his team's map picks. But now it was time for the tiebreaker map to decide who moves on. The great part about tiebreaker maps is that one incredible performance from one player can single-handedly elevate a team to the finish in spectacular fashion. It didn't matter how well or poorly you had performed in the match prior to this. All it took was one burst of incredible play. This mindset was unfortunately something Ed had no choice but to cling on to. In contrast to the first matches of the tournament, BTMC's performances were a bit meddling against SoCal. He failed to top score his teammates a single time and actually ended up bottom scoring the entire match lobby twice. But now he had the chance to remedy this, as he was now tasked with playing the tiebreaker map versus South California. And like I said, all it took was one burst of incredible play to give a team the edge they needed.
Well, let's see how long those 3 combos can hold for the side of Virginia as they look to push the lead even farther forward into the last third of the map. We've got this stream section here. It's RNG to break. Wait just a second. Utami now on the 1400 combo. Easy chalk on a 400 combo. BTMC on 1000. Rectigon only on about 200 combo. It is combo advantage to SoCal. We're going to come into this section. Utami breaks! That was what Virginia needed to stay in the lead in this one. BTMC, who would have thought throughout this match, carrying the tiebreaker, putting on the biggest combo when it matters most in the last third of the map.
Oh my god, we got it! Oh my god!
I'm so sorry. Thanks for the gift.
Let's
Out of nowhere, Ed would clutch up and top score the tiebreaker, and with a massive score from RMG alongside him, Virginia came out on top 6-5. BTMC has now successfully exercised his demon from 4 years past in the most poetic fashion possible. This bit of redemption was satisfying, but he and his teammates desired more. They wanted to go all the way. The only problem is, they now had to go up against the other California team. NorCal's first seed placement was no fluke. While the main strength of SoCal hinged on one tournament superstar, NorCal's roster featured 3 players who would go on to make it to the 2023 United States OWC roster and win it all. Those players were Fiery Rage, Window Life, and Woodshi. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, those 3 OWC players were backed by other incredible talent in Jackson, Wispy, and Tights. This incredible balance is what made this team the undisputed favorites to take the tournament, especially now that all the other top 4 seeds of the tournament were now in the losers bracket after suffering upset losses. If there was any advantage for Team Virginia to cling onto, it's that NorCal lacked a true tournament carry while they could fall back onto Rectigon. Suddenly, Virginia found themselves on the other side of the coin from the SoCal match. Now they were the ones rallying behind a superstar against a team filled with incredible support, but one player's performance alone cannot change the fact that there are 11 other players that can make an impact. NorCal would have the first pick of the match and open up with a clean victory on the Fremont 3 pick, and then immediately asserted full control after taking Virginia's Hard Rock 2 pick to take their first breakpoint of the match after a reverse choke from Window Life and a great supporting score from Fiery Rage. And after a quick win on their ensuing DT2 pick, NorCal immediately found themselves up 3-0. On map 4, Virginia was finally able to get onto the board after a nice easy score from One Tabby. Even if the tournament UI says otherwise, USC was operating with a 2x score multiplier for scores with easy, which meant One Tabby's easy FC was equivalent to a score worth nearly 940k and was enough to give Virginia the first map win. And it was from this point onwards that this match would delve into complete chaos. Neither team could find a win on their own map picks. Virginia would win NorCal's hidden 1 pick to cut their deficit to 2-3, but NorCal would respond with a breakpoint of their own on Virginia's Nomad 5 pick, giving them a 4-2 lead. NorCal's DT3 pick would end up backfiring thanks to a huge FC from Rectagon to make it 4-3, and then yet another one of Virginia's map picks would betray them as NorCal would take their Fremont 4 pick. This time, the easy multiplier wasn't enough to save Virginia, as now NorCal sat at match point with a 5-3 lead and had their final pick of the match to potentially close it out. Things were looking bleak for Virginia, but the trend on both teams failing to win their own map pick continued as Virginia would win NorCal's final map pick on Nomad 2 thanks to a massive score from RNG and Rectagon. This made it 5 breakpoints in a row, a streak that Virginia needed to break if they wanted to force tiebreaker now facing a 4-5 deficit. Virginia would lock in their pick on Nomad 1, and finally, a team would actually win their own pick as Virginia tied things at 5 apiece, and we once again have a tiebreaker on our hands. And on the iconic Furiosa Melodia, backed by an incredible pop-off from Rectagon, Virginia would escape with their second tiebreaker victory in a row and make it to winners finals. Ed had to take more of a limited role in this match as he only played in 4 out of the 11 maps against NorCal and saw a slight drop-off in performance, but it was still way better than what he was assigned to do in OWC 4 years ago. What can't be denied this time is that he has undeniably contributed greatly to his team thus far, and he had the chance to make even more of an impact next week against New York in winners finals. New York was on a Cinderella run of their own. Entering the tournament as the 7th seed, they scored upset victories over the 2nd seeded Texas and 6th seeded Maryland, but their 7th seed understates just how strong their team truly was. New York's roster consisted of 2 OWC players and a former rank 1 player. Taquito and Pez would become teammates at the 2024 OSU World Cup, and these two would end up playing each other in the grand finals of NAT 2025. And out of all the teams participating in USC this year, New York was the only one to feature a former rank 1 OSU player, that being Freddie Benson. After a stretch of limited activity in 2021 and 2022, Freddie's play hit an incredible resurgence, hitting brand new peaks and setting his best scores to date. With their team being rounded out by Opixie, Twilight, and Emerald Ages, they were a formidable roster in their own right. However, there was room for only one team in the winter side of Grand Finals. Virginia had the first pick of the match and kicked things off with a solid victory on Nomad 4 spearheaded by a near FC from BTMC. However, New York would respond with 3 map wins in a row, first on Hidden 1 led by an FC from Twilight, a breakpoint on Hard Rock 1 with a top score from Pez, and capitalized on their DT3 pick to take a 3-1 lead in the match. For the 3rd week in a row, Virginia had to rally back from a breakpoint deficit, but it was at this point where the tides of this match would heavily swing in Virginia's favor as they would go on to win 6 of the final 7 maps as Rectagon asserted full control alongside amazing support from BTMC, who clocked in 2 top scores of his own. Backed by this duo, Virginia was in the grand finals of USC for the 2nd year in a row, and they awaited their opponents. And after edging out SoCal in tiebreaker fashion, it would be New York who would cross paths with them once again for the USC title.
Oh, baby. Who's ready for some OSU? It's the grand final. It's Virginia, it's New York. It's about to get real.
The grand finals were underway with full excitement from those watching, but there was one massive problem that Virginia had to face. BTMC was not at home to play in these grand finals. He tried his best to play on a foreign setup, but his performance was, not great. His presence on the Virginia side was gravely missed, as the convincing victory in last week's match turned into a dogfight that went down to the wire. Eventually, this match trickled to a 6-5 scoreline with Virginia in the lead and a breakpoint advantage. Down to their final pick of the match, they could win it all right here on their DT3 pick, but New York was pushing in the final seconds to force the tiebreaker. Ed anxiously watched, knowing that all of this was out of his control. The most meaningful tournament run of his life, the stories and narratives leading to his most anticipated moment yet, and the redemption he longed for. All of that rested on the backs of his 3 friends and teammates in the match lobby. This was more than just another tournament series to him. It was where his tournament career started, and it was where he and his friends could team up and challenge themselves among some of the best competition OSU has to offer. In many ways, it was where his OSU career and he himself would grow as the years progressed. But it was this very same tournament series that gave him heartbreak he wished he could do anything to forget. It was here where he experienced just how unforgiving the world of competition is and how quickly reality can break someone. All of that, from the memories of the the old to the pain he wishes to forget and everything building up to this point, it all culminated into these final moments. Moments that would stick with him regardless of the outcome. The thoughts of his revived passions and everything that was left from his prior heartbreak resurfaced as all he could do was wish for his winning moment at USC to finally be bestowed upon him. But he also knew just how fragile this fleeting moment was. The question is, would he finally be able to celebrate, or would he continue to be scarred for life? But even when all conventionality says it won't happen, sometimes even your craziest wishes come true.
Please, Finley, done nothing! Wait a second, that could have worked on the map! New York, please, tiebreaker at the ending. It's literally on ACK right now. It's 100s is the difference. No!
Guys!
Let's go!
Go! 10,000 points! 10,000
BTMC had his long-awaited USC crown once and for all, and he was finally able to successfully do everything he wanted to do, and then some. He defeated the demons of years past, bested the strongest teams in the tournament that stood in their way, and was an integral piece to their championship run. Ed had won his first tournament badge since OWC 2020, and perhaps, with everything he had gone through, the inactivity, the grind, and seemingly unconquerable odds, it could very well be the most meaningful accomplishment of his playing career. It was an achievement that embodied perseverance, doing things on your own terms, and most importantly, redemption. Redemption he had been seeking across several years of hidden anguish. And the only one who knows just how sweet this moment was is the one who went through all of that himself.